without limits or judgment. A place for you and people like you to tell your most effed up stories. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight's episode is all about extremely disturbing cursed objects. Some of the objects that we will be talking about is several paintings, one of which is often found unscathed at the burned down remains of dozens of houses. Another thing we'll be talking about is a famous car by actor James Dean, which is cursed, and not only was the car cursed, but pieces of it that were spread amongst other vehicles after the tragedy, and a handcrafted box known as the conjure box. Very interesting story there that's not that well known. But before we get into all of that stuff, couple of things that I want to mention are we have now created playlists for all of our shows. So one of the things that you can do now is stream the entirety of, say, our first season or the second season, and we have categorized playlists of all the things that we did on Skinwalker Ranch, all the things that we've done related to demonic possession, black-eyed children, aliens, that kind of thing. So it's a great way to, thematically listen to our shows. And it's one of those things that if you have a long night that you just want to kind of relax and listen to some of our stuff, you can load up a playlist and just let it go. Also, of course, if you have any stories, pictures, or videos on the paranormal, please visit the website, effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com, and go to submissions to submit it. While there, become a member if you are not already, and start reading, viewing, and watching all of our paranormal content that is sent in to us by the fans. Comment and discuss it with other members. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and become a member on effedupstories.com. And, of course, if you could spread our link, effedupstories.com, in your own websites, blogs, and favorite forums, that would be of great help to us. So with that said, let's kick off the evening with one of the strangest and creepiest cursed paintings, actually the painting that inspired me to do this show. It's known as the Crying Boy. So the Crying Boy painting. The story of the Crying Boy painting started making its rounds in 1985 when several newspapers started reporting these stories about these strange, mysterious fires that started appearing all over England. What made these stories so strange is that at the scene of these burned down homes, within the debris, firefighters would find this painting, the Crying Boy painting, and not only was it intact, but apart from some minor singeing, it was perfectly fine. So the painting itself is quite literally a boy crying, is often like a boy with a single tear rolling down his cheek. You can Google this in Google Images, very easy to find. But to make the story even stranger is that there were several of these paintings. So there's more than one of these, and they've all been involved in the same type of scenario. So this was a very widespread thing, and it's strange that again that these homes would be burned to ashes and this painting would survive. And it became such a common theme that it started to take a toll on one particular Yorkshire fireman. He ended up bringing his story to a newspaper called The Sun in England. And apparently, the firefighter said that none of the firemen who knew about this painting, would let this painting in their home. I mean, that's how convinced they were that it was, paranormal or abnormal. Once the story ran, several people called in to report similar stories involving the painting. This one woman specifically said that she had the painting for about 6 months. And when her house was swallowed by fire, all of her paintings, she was a painting collector, I guess, and all of her paintings were destroyed, with the exception, of course, of the Crying Boy painting. In fact, it was popular enough that the Sun actually organized a bonfire for owners of the paintings so that they could all just throw it in there and get rid of it. Now, nobody knows who the painter of these paintings are except... there are rumors, there are certain things that point to a couple names. In particular, there was an original painted by, they say, the guy's name, it was Francis Seville. But then there was all these replicas made by a Spanish painter known as Bruno Amadeo. Now, according to Amadeo's story, because there was a researcher who tracked him down, Bruno Amadeo was actually a pseudonym of Francis Seville, so ironically, it was one person. But to break down the case, the researcher found out that, and by the way, this researcher was George Mallory. He was an occult researcher. And he was said to have cracked the case in 1995. George apparently tracked down the artist of the paintings, again, Francis Seville. And according to Seville, the Crying Boy was a homeless kid that he had found wandering around Madrid in 1969. He never spoke, and he always had this sad look in his eyes. And naturally, Seville ends up painting the boy. It's inspirational to him in some way. He saw something in him. Now, I don't know how religious Seville was, but he apparently had regular conversations with a Catholic priest, and the priest told Seville that the boy's name was Don Bonillo, and that he had run away after seeing his parents burned to death in a fire. And the priest also warned Seville to stay away from this kid. Apparently, wherever this kid settled, these mysterious fires would break out, and in fact, villagers had given him the name Diablo because of that. So I guess Seville didn't really buy into it, as nor would a lot of people, I guess. So he probably even felt bad for the little guy. It was this little homeless kid running around, and he ended up taking him in. So the little kid's living with him now, and I guess it went fine for a little bit. Seville does this painting on him, and it ended up getting really popular and earned him a lot of money. But one day he comes home and he finds his studio burned to ashes. And of course, Seville accused the kid of arson, and the kid ran away crying. Next thing you know, all these reports start coming out of Europe about the Crying Boy paintings devouring people's homes in fire. And Seville is considered to be cursed, and no one would commission him to paint, nor would they buy or even look at his paintings. Seville never saw the kid again, but in 1976, somewhere near Barcelona, a car had crashed into a wall, bursting into flames. The body was burned too bad to identify the person, but in the glove box was a license that was only partially burned. The name on the license was Don Danilo, a.k.a. the Crying Boy. So no one knows for sure if they are one and the same, although it seems kind of likely, and it's kind of ironic that he died in a fire because he burned to death in this car wreckage. So that was one of the more interesting curse painting stories I came across, and of course,
So
I believe.
what do you think with something like that? We say curse, and generally, in terms of curses and hexes, it's something that is deliberate. And in this case, we have a connection to. This kid who, what would you say? He's a fire starter. He's I guess it's the name they put on paranormal. What do they call it? Pyrokinesis.
Well, what's interesting about this story is that the kid, he was driven away from wherever he came from because he was known. I guess wherever he went, fire started. And he's obviously a sad guy. I mean, the crying painting, he's always seen as sad. It makes you think that it's unintentional. Like, he can't help it. Wherever he goes, this kind of thing follows him. What's interesting about it, though, is that you get a painter who paints the kid. He doesn't have any connection other than he took him in. And that curse is passed on simply in his image.
Well,
of this kid.
and in a lot of cultures, effigies are used, images, an image or an effigy of somebody. I guess it's like using somebody's name in a ritual. It's this powerful connection. So, I guess in an occult fashion, I could certainly see the connection if there was something particular about this child, the crying boy, supernatural, then perhaps there's lots of traditions that talk about artists of having a connection to the spirit world, and perhaps this artist was able to create a connection or channel whatever it is about this boy that is able to start fires.
Well, the interesting thing, and of course this is something that you yourself just mentioned, and I agree with, is that usually curses are intentional. Like it's rituals are exerted to make these things come to fruition. You have people who concentrate, who focus to focus this power into things to make this happen. In this case, you have a painter, he just paints some kid, and I don't think the kid intentionally, to me at least, the story comes across as, the kid is driven away everywhere he goes because this thing follows him and he has no control over it. That's why he's sad. Nobody wants him around, but he can't help it. So it doesn't appear to have any deliberate intentions here, which is what makes this story strange. And of course, pretty much all of the ones I have here tonight, they're all, except for one of them, I think. But the rest of them are just these strange, who knows? Who knows where it comes from?
Well,
but they're interesting.
In my, in my research for this particular podcast, one of the themes that I kept coming up with over and over again, is going back to this demonic influence, and it's interesting that the locals called this kid El Diablo or Diablo, the devil.
Like perhaps he was born into it. Like maybe ritualistically, maybe his mother, was into occult rituals and stuff like that before he was ever born. He was doomed before he was born.
Or some claim that demons and devils are able to just latch on, especially the the poverty stricken, the disenfranchised, and or you could be right. His parents could have been occultists, and were playing with things that they got out of their control. I mean, I guess it's impossible to tell it now. But I guess continuing with that theme of effigies, I came across this really interesting tale about Robert the Doll. Now, have you ever heard of this guy?
Yes, I've come across it.
So, in 1896, a family, the Ottos, a slave of theirs had made this this doll out of straw and whatever. Now apparently this servant was a known practitioner of voodoo, and gave the doll as a gift to the couple's son. His name's Robert. So as time goes on, this kid this kid becomes like best friends with the doll, and his parents start to get concerned because he's spending all his time hanging out with his doll, talking to it. And the most concerning part is that not only does he talk to the doll, but he actually answers himself in a different voice. So they can hear him through the door or whatever. They don't really see him doing this. I guess I couldn't find any reports of them, watching him talk to himself, but they could hear him asking questions and talking, and somebody replying, which they assumed was their son in a different voice. So as Robert got older, of course, he kept the doll, because this guy Robert Eugene, he went by the name Gene, I guess, and so he gave the doll his first name, Robert. So it's just something that confused the crap out of me when I was first reading the story. I was like, wait, isn't that kid's name Robert? So his name was Robert Eugene, but he went by Gene, and then he named the doll Robert. And so, of course, as he grows up and he gets older, he hangs on to this doll, and his wife doesn't like it, and they can hear it running around up in the room by itself. And I guess it got to the point where it started, it would start moving around in very obvious ways. And I guess it had grabbed her once, and then that was it. And then when her husband died, she left the doll in the house and just moved out. And then the next people that moved in, the little girl found the doll and kept it. Now, I don't know why somebody would keep this thing. It looks like the devil to me. But I don't know. There's something about dolls I never ever liked. And of course, one day, mom and dad heard this little girl screaming, and what she's saying is that the doll had grabbed her. And now Robert sits in a display case in a museum somewhere. But this idea of a possessed doll, because of course. I guess one of the most famous ones. And one of the other interesting things I found is that this doll apparently was the inspiration for the Chucky movies.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, I came across several different supposedly cursed or possessed dolls when I was researching this. So much so that I thought that at some point, perhaps, that in itself could be a podcast, because there's so many of them. There's even an island.
Oh, yeah, in Mexico, the island of dolls.
Yeah.
Now, here is one of the most interesting things about this whole doll possession thing. Now, where does the word doll come from? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Idol.
Oh, Oh yeah.
Right. So there's this whole religious connection where dolls are literally idols. They're and now I guess because I kind of latched onto this when digging around, and at least from the very stringent Christian interpretation, dolls are literally empty vessels that give devils and demons, however you want to term them, basically it gives them a body for them to enter this world. Like, there's certain rules and certain laws that they have to abide by, and apparently the making, and I guess you think of the adoration of certain dolls that people have. A little girl with her little doll. I guess that could be considered a form of idol worship. And here we have this whole concept of basically creating vessels for spirits, these empty vessels. And then you have people who get these great emotional attachments to these empty vessels, and perhaps that attracts some wandering spirit who then takes up residence within the doll, especially in the case of a voodoo priestess who specifically creates the doll for such a purpose.
Another doll we should probably cover at some point is the Annabelle doll.
Yeah, and of course now the Annabelle story, they call the original devil doll. Of course, this has been covered in the major motion picture, The Conjuring.
Well, they only really briefly hinted at it.
Yeah. Now,
but
I guess this is Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah.
The demonologist or the paranormal investigators. I mean, they're
like the most famous.
Yes, they're some of the first.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I have some stories here that, of course, like one is a car, one is a conjuring box, but I do want to circle back to these other two paintings. I don't know what it is about the paintings that I find so interesting. Maybe because of, the fact is this obscure art, but there are two other paintings that I came across. Have you heard of The Hands Resist Him?
I can't say that I have.
Well, this painting, and I strongly urge anyone who's listening to this, who's interested in this kind of thing, to do like a Google image search on some of these paintings,
or any other search engine.
No, Google. Let's do Google. Every other search engine sucks. Yes, I'm speaking about you, Bing, but. The hands resist him. So it's this really creepy and bizarre painting that was allegedly cursed and sold on eBay, not unlike, Jason Haxton's Dybbuk box. And this happened in February 2000. Now, the painting was originally created in 1972 by an artist by the name of Bill Stoneham. Now, it's very, very easy to find this on Google search, but it's a really, really creepy image anyway. It's essentially this small boy with this creepy-looking female doll that's almost as tall as him standing next to him. Both of them are in front of this glass panel door. And I mean it's like, you could see, it's not like just a window. It's like the whole door got these like glass panes going through it, and in the background it's blacks, and there's a moon at the top, so you can tell like it's nighttime. Like this door is looking out into the night, and the creepy part, the creepiest part, I guess, is that behind the boy, pressing up against the glass, are dozens of these human hands, and they're reaching towards the boy. And the way that the lighting is in this painting, and the doll, by the way, has this really creepy look on its face. And with the hands in the dark and the moon and just the shadowing and stuff on this thing. I mean, it really paints a creepy looking painting. And the people who sold this painting on eBay claimed that the boy and doll, now get this, they would come alive and leave the painting and walk right into the room where the painting was. Now, how creepy would it be to be sitting in your room and all of a sudden the figures in your painting are standing there staring at you?
That probably has to be one of the most bizarre painting haunting stories I've ever. I can't say I've ever heard of a character stepping off of the canvas.
Yeah, I mean it's really something. So, once this story got around, it made the artist pretty popular, and he ended up speaking about it afterwards, explaining that the kid in the picture was actually based on a picture of himself when he was 5 years old. He was very surprised, actually, to hear about the story, but he did mention that the owner of the gallery where his painting was first displayed and the critic who reviewed his show both died within a year of that show. So that's a bad omen if there ever was one. So that was a strange painting. And the last painting I want to talk about, this one's probably the creepiest looking one I've seen, at least in so far as the haunted ones. This one is called The Anguished Man.
Ah, yes.
And you've seen this one. Okay, well, the Anguished Man painting is, to me, the creepiest looking of the three. There's this blue backdrop that's all smears of various shades of blue. It's really kind of chaotic looking, and the main figure is what appears to be a human face and shoulders, only it kind of looks like a burn victim, at least to me. The skin tones are all red and yellow as if the flesh was peeled off or burned. The eyebrows are mostly gone, no eyelids, but you can see the eyes and the eye sockets. The nose is missing, and his mouth is open, but the way it is like centered in such a way that his teeth makes it look like his mouth is somewhat melted or something like that. And it looks like, it really looks like someone in extreme pain, like someone who's burned. Now, the story mostly comes from someone named Sean, who sent his story into some site on the internet. He said he was given this old oil painting by his grandmother over 25 years ago. His grandmother told him that the artist used his own blood mixed with the paint, and then he killed himself shortly after completing the painting. So Sean ends up keeping this painting in a spare bedroom on the third floor of his house, and soon after, he and his wife starts to hear these loud banging sounds and scraping and just these, strange noises in general. His dog would not even go to the top of the stairs on the floor where the painting was kept. And they would hear these crying and sobbing noises at night. And then they started seeing a shadow man, walking around the house. So, Sean started waking up to see the shadow man at the foot of his bed. And he and his wife started feeling like they were being watched. And they were finding these cold spots in their home, and they often felt like there was someone standing just behind them. At which point, mind you, this thing would proceed to whisper into their ear. So other notable things was Sean's wife waking up looking into a stranger's eyes, strange mist that filled his bathroom, making it extremely cold, and it made him really lightheaded before disappearing. Strange orbs, repeated nightmares about a middle-aged man, which, by the way, they believe the shadow figure was this man. And Sean's son was also pushed down the stairs in the middle of the night. So Sean actually recorded the painting for 8 consecutive hours for 3 days in a row. He put a video on YouTube. Now, you can go look this up. He put a video on YouTube. There's a small clip that you can find, and you could actually, it highlights a couple of things that he caught there. Like, you could hear a faint scraping. Part of the clip you could hear, you could see, like, the door actually being closed. And there was another one where you can hear this really, really loud bang. And, of course, allegedly, there's nobody around during this, the family is supposed to be sleeping. So, that's really, I guess, again, one of those things, like you choose to take the man's word for it or not, but you can watch the video, certainly. I mean, like a lot of these videos, yeah, they surely can be faked, but, everything can be faked these days. So it's really one of those things, you just watch it and try to, make your own judgment. But I will say, no matter which way you look at it, it is a very, very creepy painting. So getting away from the paintings, one of the really is haunting stories in terms of cursed things. Now, Ryan, you probably come across this. Have you heard of James Dean Little Bastard car?
Oh, indeed.
Okay, so, James Dean was an actor, and he was also a racer. And he happened to own this Porsche 550 Spider. It was a super rare car, only 90 were ever made. It was heavily customized, and James called it his Little Bastard. So anyway, when Dean was filming this movie, Rebel Without a Cause, he got this car for racing. It wasn't meant to be his main car. It was like I guess a fill-in car. And he got this guy named George Barris to customize it for him. And Barris is known for, like, he designed the Batmobile for the TV show in the 60s. So, notable guy, right? So anyway, the word is that Dean's friends didn't like the car from day one. Barris, his friend Eartha Kitt, and ex-girlfriend Ursula Andress said that they felt there was an evil presence emanating from the vehicle. In fact, Eartha Kitt was quoted as saying, "James, I don't like this car. It's going to kill you." Dean also met actor Alec Guinness and asked his opinion. Like, he was showing off the car, and he asked his opinion of what he thought of it. And to which Alec replied, the car was sinister, and apparently told Dean that if he got in it, he would be dead within the week. So maybe it was all of the warnings he was getting at the time, but Dean had done and said a few things during the last few weeks that makes one wonder if he didn't actually sense his own death coming, or maybe, all the talk he was hearing from his friends was getting to him. But nevertheless, some of the things that he was rumored to have said was that he had, he was given a kitten from Liz Taylor while on the set for the movie Giant. He ended up giving the kitten away with his reasoning being, and I quote, "Someday I may go out and not come back." He also filmed a commercial for the National Safety Council, and he changed the line in the script that said, "Please drive safely. The life you save may be your own, too. The life you save may be mine." So again, like, these are these small, subtle things, but when you put it into context, it makes you wonder. So on September 30th, Dean was driving on U.S. Route 466 near Colam, California, and he ends up in a head-on collision with a college student named Donald Turnipseed. In the car with Dean was his mechanic, Rolf Wutherich, neither of which, of course, were wearing their seatbelts because, God forbid, they were too cool for that, perhaps. I don't know. But Wutherich lived. Dean died with a broken neck, severe head trauma, internal bleeding, multiple fractures, he was banged up really bad. So that's where his story ended. And you could probably chalk it up, to the sixth sense, everybody was having about this gonna happen rather than a cursed car. But
that's a strange thing. I mean, I've owned a few cars, and I can't say I've ever had anybody say to me, "That's a sinister looking vehicle, friend."
Yeah, everybody kind of sensed something was off about this car, and of course Dean just blew it off, and you could chalk it up to coincidence, but what follows this tragedy just really hits it home that this car was definitely cursed. So after this, Barris paid $2,500 for the wreckage. And upon delivery of this wreckage to Barris's garage, it fell off the trailer and broke a mechanic's leg. Okay, big deal, right? So after that, Barris sold the engine to Troy McHenry, And on October 24th, 1956, Troy was racing at the Paramona Fairgrounds when his vehicle spun out of control and slammed into a tree, killing him. So this is the engine, okay, from that wrecked car. Bear sold it to another racer, and then his first time out racing with this thing, his car goes out of control and it kills him. Okay, so that's mysterious right there. So then Bears had also sold off 2 tires from this wrecked car, to some guy, and both tires malfunctioned at the same time, forcing the car off the road. There were 2 people that were hurt trying to steal some of the parts from the wreckage. Next, the California Highway Patrol persuaded Barris to loan them the car for this traveling exhibition. And so the wreckage was stored in a garage in Fresno, but on March 1959, this big fire breaks out and it destroys everything except the wreckage of Dean's car. Right? Again, mysterious. Your whole garage is gone, but the thing that survives is this cursed car, or wreckage of a cursed car, right? So anyway, the exhibition goes on, and the bad luck keeps going with it. The car was on display at a Sacramento high school, and the bolts holding the car that was in place for however they had it displayed, they snap off. The car goes flying off the display, and it breaks the hip of a 15-year-old boy. There was a truck driver hauling the wreckage to Salinas when the driver lost control of the truck, fell out of the cab, and the mangled corpse of Dean's car just happens to come off the trailer, lands on him, and kills him. Right? I mean, the dude's driving a tractor trailer or a truck, whatever,
flatbed truck or something, falls out of the cab of the truck, and the wreckage of the car he's towing flies off the back of the flatbed, lands on him, and crushes him. That has to be the most prolific. That car is pretty much a serial killer.
Yeah, and I'm not even done yet. So, and not to laugh at it that somebody died. I'm not that that dark, but it's just so bizarre, right? And of course, the cherry on top to this whole story is that after the car exhibition had ended, Barris had the car put into a sealed boxcar, and it was on its way to Florida. And then it was transported to California, but when it got to L.A., the car had simply vanished, even though the seal was not broken. And of course, the car was never seen again. So
I'll tell you, because I know for a fact, boxcar seals have numbers on them. So it's not just like, okay, we sealed it and you could break it and put another seal on it. Because, when you get to the other side, if you compare the numbers, if the numbers aren't the same, then somebody's tampered with your load. That's the whole, so somebody would know.
So the whole thing, that's one of the most bizarre, and just so many things happen with that car. So, frankly, if it disappeared, it's probably for the better because, having parts of that car put in your car is a bad idea. So the last thing, I guess, the last real thing I want to talk about that's got any real detail to it here is the conjure chest. Have you ever heard of that?
Vaguely, but I haven't gotten into it. I just thought, oh, look, another Dybbuk box.
That's kind of the frame of mind I had at first, but not really. This one's a little different. So the conjure chest, this was said to have happened about 150 years ago. There was this man named Jacob Cooley, and he was extremely rich. He was a very rich man. He came from a rich family and was, to put it frankly, an asshole. He owned many slaves and lived as a planter on a farm. He also beat his slaves severely for the tiniest of things. And, with this background on Jacob Cooley's, where our story begins. He's an asshole who beats slaves. He's rich. One of those guys, right? So Jacob had ordered one of his slaves named Hosea to build this chest for his firstborn child. Hosea was an extremely skilled furniture maker, and he built this chest. It was described as in an empire style. It had 4 drawers, and it had glass knobs, which I'm sure back then pretty extravagant, by hand, making glass knobs and. Anyway, nobody seems to know why, but when Hosea finished this chest, Jacob got like crazy mad at the final product. So much so that he violently beat Hosea, and he even actually died a few days later. So now the slaves were led by what they call, or I shouldn't say now, all the slaves were led by what they call a conjure man. The conjure man was an old, wise man who was into occult teachings. The conjure man, he ends up putting a curse on this chest for all the future generations because of what Jacob did to Hosea. And to do this, he allegedly sprinkled owl's blood over a drawer and sang some kind of chant. Now, everyone in Jacob's family who were to have any association with the chest were to receive this curse as well. So this was a family generational thing. Now, this started with Jacob's firstborn, who died soon after birth. And after this, Jacob's brother inherited the chest and was stabbed to death by his personal servant. Later on, Jacob had more children, and then they had children, and the box was passed around. When one of them put a bridal gown into the chest, the woman's husband died. Jacob's daughter, Melinda, was given the chest later on as a gift, and because she was really depressed at the time. And right after she gets the chest, she died. And just before she died, apparently, very quickly, she had turned very gray-haired and run-down looking, despite the fact that she was just getting out of her 30s. After Melinda died, her surviving husband, Sean, was hit in the head by a steamboat's gangplank, and he died. So this kind of thing continued for years. All told, 16 people were said to have been cursed by the box. Apparently, the curse only took hold when someone's personal belongings were put inside the box. The last victim was a friend of the family. A hunter's wife put his hunting clothes into the box, and her husband ends up getting shot by an accident. So after this happened, the widow went looking for a way to break the curse, and apparently got the answer from an old African American friend. So she already knew her. She was told that to break this curse, she would have to be given a dead owl without asking for one. Now, what's that if it's not hard, right?
Yeah.
So she was to get a dead owl without asking for one. She would have to boil green leaves of a willow tree from sunup to sundown while the dead owl remained in sight. And lastly, the boiled leaves had to be buried in a jug with its handle facing east towards the sun and below a flowering bush. She was then told that the only way to know that the curse had been broken is if one of the cursed people died before the first full days of fall. Now, the friend that told her all of this, ironically, was the last victim. She died in early September. So she was almost the fortune teller of her own death. The conjure chest now is apparently in a Kentucky history museum, and it's kept in storage until it suits a future exhibit.
It's almost like the chest got its revenge on the practitioner. Told the widow how to get rid of it.
Yeah. Which actually kind of reminds me of
the Dybbuk box.
Jason Haxton says something about when he buried it, like it almost like it tried to kill him or something like that. So that, it's kind of in line with that. I mean, a couple other things that I ran into when I was looking was, have you heard of the Mobitel cursed phone number?
No.
Well, the Mobitel curse phone number is 0888-888-888. Okay, so this phone number was given out, I believe, to 3 different people. Now, I mean, from what I've read, the people who owned it were, involved with the mafia. So, I don't know if you could really chalk it up to a cursed number, but they were all shot and killed, right? I'm not sure if
I think that's a pretty likely way of dying in the mafia, getting shot.
Yeah, it seems pretty likely, but nevertheless, they took it to, it was such a, just the fact that everybody who got the number died, they actually took it out of circulation, like nobody else can ever have the number. One of the other, I guess, interesting things I came across was, have you ever heard of the Myrtle's home? It's like a haunted house. It's considered to be very haunted. It's out in the States somewhere. Anyway, the most haunted thing apparently in this house is the Myrtle's plantation mirror. It's allegedly, like, this place is a haunted bed and breakfast. And the plantation actually dates back to like 1796. And here's the kicker: it was built on Native American burial ground, right? Just
you
like
don't want to
something.
be doing that.
It reminds me of like Pet Cemetery or something like that. So anyway,
or any ghost story ever.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's rumored that this is also the location of at least like 10 murders, and paranormal events are almost like a daily occurrence. But, getting back to the mirror, so guests of the plantation have reported seeing figures lurking in the mirror, like people in the mirror, as well as like child-sized handprints that would just like, appear on the glass. Like, I guess, like, like when you press your hand on glass, you get that, or a mirror, you get that steam kind of handprint.
The moisture and oil from your
hand. Yeah. And, there's a legend claims that the mirror contains the spirit of Sarah Woodruff and her children. The Woodruffs were poisoned to death, and though custom dictates that, if you've probably heard this before, that mirrors should actually be covered after death to prevent spirits from getting trapped in them.
Yes.
Well, this mirror was not covered. So the belief was that the Woodruff souls are very much present and trapped inside the mirror. So that's probably...
There's, I gotta say, in a lot of the reading I did, I must have come across at least a dozen pieces of cursed or otherwise haunted furniture. Everything from an antique 4-poster bed that would hop around the room when people tried to sleep in it, and people would have dreams of an old woman climbing onto the bed and sitting on their chest, which is kind of reminiscent of the hag encounters.
Yeah.
But once the bed, once they got rid of the bed, it ended. So it was, here you have, it's almost like a hag encounter, but attached to a bed. A couple of different dressers and armoires.
I've heard of chairs that. There was these chairs that when you sat in it, it's like they'd throw you out of it.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, and of course there's a famous chair, I boulieve, in a pub in Ireland.
Yes.
Anybody who's said to sit in the chair it's said that anybody who sits in the chair will die shortly after, and of course. It was all cordoned off, and
that was put to the test. There was
several times people put it to the test, to the point now where the bar owner has hung the chair from basically the chair is almost touching the ceiling. It's hung off of the wall right up to the ceiling, so nobody can sit in it.
Yeah, like I remember, I can't remember the convict's name, like Busby or something like that. They were going to hang him, and he said something like, may death strike any who sits in my chair, kind of a thing. And they kept this chair in the pub, and they put this like string across, the armrests.
Yes.
And so people would go in there, and they get drunk. People would dare people to sit in it, and everybody who sat in it died. Like I remember, like there was like I believe it was like 2 military men went in there, and one of them dared the other one to sit in it, and he does. And I believe he died in a car accident when he left. I remember that one. I also remember The only other one I remember, and there was at least half a dozen. I know that, but I'm trying to remember specifics. There was another one where finally the bar owner had had it, it's proved its point, kind of a thing, and he put it down in the basement, to prevent people from sitting on it. And the one of the guys who delivered drinks, right, deliver or whatever, he goes down, puts the drinks and stuff like that, and he just happens to sit on this chair that happens to be there to take a rest for a couple minutes, and he dies. Right, so
yeah, he was the last victim, right?
Yeah, so like you said, now it's somewhere in a museum, 6 feet off the ground, nailed to the wall. And I've come across several different, as you said, pieces of furniture. In particular, there was this mirror. I couldn't find the story for this.
Well, just
podcast.
Before we get off of the chair, though, I guess it's important to point out that. In all of course, we're talking, when we're talking about cursed furniture and cursed items, the lines really get blurred between, is this a curse? Is this an evil spirit? So is this a kind of a possession, or is it a magical hex? But the deathbed curse seems to be one of the most potent of the curses. And of course, this chair was a perfect example of the deathbed curse.
Well, that's a good point. For whatever reason, I don't know about you, but when I was looking, I seen, and I could theorize why I think this is, but I saw a lot of jewelry that's cursed. Now everybody heard of the Black Hope diamond and stuff like that, but I mean, would you say that possibly because these are rare stones or diamonds.
Guess it could, depending on your religious bent, it comes back to that theme of idolatry. And I mean, what is idled more than precious jewels and jewelry?
True.
Of course, you have the love that a little child will pour into a doll or some other similar effigy. You have the emotion and the creativity that is poured into a work of art like a painting. And then you have the kind of adoration that comes with those kinds of things. The adoration of a child, the adoration of those who enjoy such artwork, and the adoration of those who appreciate finely crafted jewels. And I guess in some circles anyway, they would say that of course this is these are the false idols that people fall prey to, and they invite spirits to interfere with them.
Well, do you think just to think of it as a broad subject, how adolescent teenagers they unknowingly, purposefully, somehow, if they're very emotional, they're
create
hormonal.
The poltergeist phenomenon.
Yes. Now, what if, again, you have these items that people have a connection to, right? Whether it's furniture, whether it's jewelry, whether it's a doll, so they have these things that to somebody they mean something. They're more than just a thing. And somewhere in their life, in their mind, in their body, in their spirit, they have this emotional turmoil, some kind of something that they probably subconsciously channel into one of these things accidentally. They say, for example, it was a chair. It was their, maybe it's the chair that they found solace in. It's the chair they thought in. It's the, the spot they went to think, to whatever. And subconsciously, they transfer all of that negative energy into it. And maybe that's how the curse becomes. It's kind of like, I mean, if you really think about it, it's kind of like when somebody curses something and they focus and they do rituals and they focus that energy into it.
Oh, yeah. Most ritual items are referred to as a focus or a foci. And that's precisely, it is precisely what it sounds like it is. And exactly, if paranormal and supernatural energies and powers do exist, and personally I do believe they do, there's no reason why. And I guess, it really would make sense that that something made by the hand of man, and then something that it is paid attention to almost to the point of adoration. That's a lot of focus, right? That's a lot of a person focusing into one thing. I guess there's no reason why. I guess it's almost like creating a thought form, or what do they call a tulpas.
So basically
giving it a body.
Yeah, so like I guess my point here is that, is it really that different from somebody who practices and focuses and conjures up a ritual to focus a curse into an object? Is that really different from someone who, subconsciously, accidentally, just accidentally transfers that same negative energy into something? It's like the same thing. It's just not intentional.
Because we're in this society, we're not aware of the spiritual side of our world. That people unintentionally create cursed items all the time, I suppose.
Yep, that's basically my thought. So, Ryan, is there anything else that you would like to add to the topic of cursed objects?
Not really. I guess the main thing to remember, I guess with anything, is there comes a certain point where belief isn't even necessary. If something seems like there's some bad mojo, if you're getting bad vibes from something, listen to your sixth sense. Don't get in the Sinister car. Don't buy the evil painting. Don't sit in the mysterious strangely carved chair or whatever.
Unless, of course, you really want to be a victim.
I guess there are those people out there.
Yeah, I guess it would be an interesting way to commit suicide if you're going that route. So at another date, perhaps we will visit, because this was very specific on cursed objects. But there are just strange curses as well that in itself could be its own podcast, like the infamous Club 27, Suicide Forest, all these different things. That could be a topic at a future time, but for now, that is our picks, I guess, for the interesting cursed objects we've come across. For everybody listening, of course, thank you. If you do have any paranormal stories, and by that's a blanket statement. I mean, that covers UFO, conspiracy, whatever. You got that stuff, whether it's in story, picture, video, some kind of form. Send it to us at effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. We'd love to put it on the site, and perhaps more if it really tickles our fancy. With that said, thank you for listening, and I hope you join us next time.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.